Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, I'm bringing you 3 deeply unsettling road trip stories that actually happened to real people. These aren't urban legends or campfire tales. These are genuine experiences that turned ordinary journeys into nightmares that still haunt the people who lived through them. Before we dive in, I need to provide some context for these stories. Each one was shared with me directly by the person who experienced it, and I've kept the details as close to their original accounts as possible. Names have been changed where requested, but the events themselves remain exactly as they were told to me. Now, I want to know, where are you right now? Are you planning a road trip soon? Have you ever felt unsafe while traveling? Drop a comment and let me know. There's something about road trip horror that hits different because we've all been there, vulnerable, away from home, trusting strangers we'll never see again. Alright, let's get started. Story 1. The Uninvited Guest. I need to provide some context so this story makes complete sense. I go to a public university in California, part of the UC system. If you're not familiar with how UC schools work, some campuses like UCLA, Berkeley, and Santa Barbara are massive party schools, while others like mine are much smaller and quieter. Most of the big UC campuses have what's known as a dedicated tour day. Officially, it's for incoming students to visit campus, but realistically, it's just an excuse for current students to throw absolutely insane all-day parties. Berkeley has Cal Day, Santa Barbara has Deltopia, you get the idea. My campus is about 2.5 hours from Santa Barbara, and it's pretty common for students from smaller UCs to make the drive to the bigger schools for these events. I'd never been into that scene. I'm not much of a partier, honestly, so it was never something I bothered with. But a few months ago, I realized it was my senior year. Last chance. If I didn't go this year, I'd never get another opportunity. So when my friends asked if I wanted to come with them to Deltopia, I said screw it and committed. We drove down on Friday afternoon, the day before the main festivities. The car was absolutely packed. Hunter was driving and the rest of us were Damon, Benjamin, Armin, and me. We're all over 6 feet tall, so you can imagine how cramped that 2.5-hour drive felt. But we had good conversation and music, so it went by quickly enough. Once we got to Isla Vista, that's the neighborhood where UCSB is located, we spent almost an hour looking for parking. I'm not exaggerating. Deltopia is so popular that finding a parking spot is genuinely harder than getting into the parties. Just as we were about to give up and park miles away, Hunter worked his magic. He spotted a sorority girl walking to her car and convinced her to let us use her designated spot for the weekend. We all got a good laugh out of that. Only Hunter could pull something like that off. So everything was going according to plan. Hunter's younger sister is a junior at UCSB, and she'd agreed to let all 5 of us crash on the floor of her apartment. That might sound rough, but during Deltopia, having any indoor space to sleep is basically a golden ticket. Her roommates were super chill too, so we decided to start partying with them that Friday night, even though Deltopia technically didn't kick off until Saturday morning. Now, there's one more person I need to mention before this story makes sense. Hunter has this acquaintance. I'm going to call him Amir, though that's not his real name. I'm using the word friend pretty loosely here because Amir isn't really Hunter's friend. He's one of those guys who clings to social circles without ever truly being part of them. Amir is deeply insecure, obnoxiously loud, completely oblivious to social cues, constantly seeking validation, and somehow manages to make every single conversation about himself. And before you call me out for being harsh, understand that Amir has done some genuinely messed up things to my friends and me over the years. I've more than earned the right to speak candidly about him. A few weeks before the trip, Amir had mentioned to Hunter in passing that he was also planning to go to Deltopia. There was never any real conversation about logistics, where he'd stay, who he was going with, nothing. He wasn't part of our plan, and honestly, none of us had even thought about him on the drive down. About an hour after we settled into Hunter's sister's apartment, we decided to make a liquor run for ourselves and the roommates. The 5 of us walked to a store about 6 blocks away, bought what we needed, and started heading back. As we were leaving the liquor store, hands full of bags, who do we see standing on the curb? Amir. Just standing there. Hands in his pockets. Staring at us like he'd been waiting. None of us said anything. We just kept walking toward the apartment, and Amir sort of fell into step with us, like he'd been part of the group the entire time. We were maybe 2 blocks from the store when Amir spoke up. "Why are you guys so surprised to see me?" I remember thinking, is this kid brain dead? Of course we were surprised to see him. There had been zero plan to meet up with him. Zero communication about it. And as far as any of us knew, Hunter hadn't even told him where we were staying. We all kind of ignored the question and kept walking, unsure how this was going to play out. Things escalated the moment we got back to the apartment. Amir asked Hunter if he could use the bathroom, and before Hunter could even answer, Amir jogged ahead and rang the doorbell. When Hunter's sister answered, Amir walked right up to her, someone he'd never met in his life, and said, "I'm staying here," before stepping past her into the apartment. Hunter's sister looked confused but assumed Amir was part of our group. Why wouldn't she? But the second Hunter realized what Amir had done, he was furious. I've known Hunter for years and I've rarely seen him that angry. I could go into extreme detail about the argument that followed, but here's what you need to know. Hunter told Amir straight up that he had to leave, that he wasn't welcome, that lying to his sister and forcing his way into her apartment crossed a massive line. Amir didn't go quietly. He stood outside the door for another 20 minutes, arguing, pleading, trying to negotiate his way back in. But Hunter's not the kind of guy you want to test, and eventually Amir got the message and left. We got pretty drunk after that, and honestly, Amir was all we could talk about. It was such bizarre, uncomfortable behavior that we couldn't stop dissecting it. Later that night, someone realized that Hunter had been sharing his iPhone location with Amir, which meant Amir had literally stalked us to the apartment using GPS. Hunter immediately stopped sharing his location and we tried to move on. The next day, Saturday, was incredible. Deltopia absolutely lived up to the hype. The parties were insane, the weather was perfect, and for most of the day we forgot all about Amir. By late afternoon, most of the big events had wrapped up. We met up with 5 other friends and the 10 of us ended up back at Hunter's sister's apartment, just chilling and rehashing the day's chaos. We filled the other guys in on the Amir situation, and they were just as baffled as we'd been. That's when one of our friends, Ryland, said something that made us all freeze. "I think I still have Amir's location." Ryland pulled out his phone and checked. His jaw actually dropped. He turned the screen toward us. The little blue dot showing Amir's location was on top of us, like directly outside the apartment. The second we mentioned it, the dot started moving, fast. Like Amir had been sitting in a car watching the building, and when he realized we'd found him, he sped away. It was beyond bizarre. Showing up uninvited once was bad enough. But coming back a second time after being explicitly told to leave? That was borderline psychotic. We probably should have taken it more seriously. That kind of obsessive behavior should have been a red flag. But instead, we all just laughed about how weird Amir was and went back to partying. That night, after everyone had crashed, I woke up sometime well after midnight. I barely had time to process where I was when I heard the unmistakable sound of glass shattering from somewhere deeper in the apartment. I shot up off the floor, looking around to see if anyone else had woken up. No one had. Everyone had gone to sleep completely wasted. I realized pretty quickly that I was the only one who'd heard it. And if someone had broken in, I was the only one who could do anything about it. I didn't have a weapon, so I grabbed an empty wine bottle off the floor, took a deep breath, and started creeping toward the noise. My heart was absolutely pounding. When I entered the living room, I saw the sliding glass door that led to the balcony had been completely shattered. A huge rock, like the size of a softball, sat in the middle of the floor, surrounded by glittering shards of glass. I didn't need to be convinced. I knew Amir was behind this. I was about to go wake everyone up when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a closet door handle jiggle slightly. I froze. A different kind of fear washed over me, something deeper and more primal. I hadn't thought Amir had the guts to go beyond property destruction. The idea that he'd actually broken into the apartment, that he was inside with us, terrified me. I was just about to yank the closet door open when my better judgment stopped me. Something told me not to. Instead, I quietly backed away, snuck into the bedroom, and shook Hunter awake. I whispered what I'd seen. The 2 of us crept back to the living room together. By the time we got there, the closet door was standing wide open. I looked around frantically, scanning every corner. I didn't see Amir anywhere. That's when Hunter reached into the closet and pulled something out. A massive kitchen knife. I stared at it in complete shock. The blade was at least 8 inches long, a chef's knife, the kind you'd use to butcher meat. Amir had been standing in that closet, holding a knife, waiting for me. If I'd opened that door, there's a very real chance he would have stabbed me. Maybe just to scare me. Maybe worse. I don't know, and I never want to find out. That was the single most terrifying moment of my entire life. Hunter and I woke up the rest of the house. We did a complete sweep to make absolutely sure Amir wasn't hiding anywhere else. We called the police, obviously. They came, took a report, looked at the broken door. But all they told us was that property damage during Deltopia is common, and we were just one of many incidents that night. Before you ask, Amir had stopped sharing his location with Ryland by that point, so we couldn't even prove he'd been stalking us. We had to leave the next morning. Hunter was freaked out about leaving his sister and her roommates there, especially knowing Amir had managed to sneak in once. Before we got in the car, Hunter typed out a long message to Amir, basically telling him that what he'd done was criminal, that we had evidence, and that if he ever came near any of us again we'd press charges. The message never delivered. Amir had already blocked Hunter. We all pulled out our phones and checked. Every single one of us had been blocked. Over the next few weeks, none of us heard from him. Radio silence. It was like he'd completely disappeared. I still can't wrap my head around it. Amir has always been weird, sure. Annoying, desperate for attention, socially clueless. But he'd never been violent. I'd always thought of him as passive, honestly, all bark, no bite. But that night proved me wrong. He knows where all of us live. He has our schedules, our routines. And even though months have passed without incident, I'm still looking over my shoulder. I'm still worried that one day he's going to show up again. And next time there might not be a closet door between us. Story 2, the fake traffic stop. My name is Arthur, though friends call me Artie. This happened a long time ago, back in 1996, but I'd say I still remember about 90% of the details as vividly as if it happened yesterday. It was late April. I was fresh out of basic training and had just been assigned to Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas, working as a communications specialist. Being stationed in Texas was actually great for me. I'm originally from Mississippi, and part of the reason I enlisted in the first place was to get as far away from home as possible without leaving the country. At 24 years old, I was ready for a fresh start. My closest friends on base were a guy named Sebastian, Sebas for short, and a woman named Kay. I've since lost touch with both of them, but back then, the three of us were inseparable. It was a warm weekend in early April when Sebas proposed taking a road trip to Austin for the day. We were all getting sick of the base's monotony, same routines, same faces, same beige buildings, and Austin was only a few hours away. Kay offered to drive, so we packed her SUV with snacks and supplies and hit the road that same afternoon. About an hour into the drive, we were on a mostly empty stretch of Highway 87 when Sebas spoke up from the back seat. "Did you guys see that car pull off the shoulder right after we passed?" I turned around and looked through the rear window. Sure enough, there was a dark-colored Tahoe or something similar trailing us at a steady distance, maybe 100 yards back. I hadn't noticed it pull onto the highway, but we were on a major road. It wasn't exactly suspicious on its own. But then Kay changed lanes just to see what would happen. The SUV followed. She did it again a minute later. Same thing. The vehicle mirrored her move perfectly, maintaining the exact same distance. I was confused at first, trying to figure out what was happening. Then a minute later, the SUV turned on its lights, red and blue flashers mounted inside the grille. Everything made sense. We were getting pulled over by an undercover cop. Kay slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder. I watched through the side mirror as the Tahoe pulled in behind us, lights still flashing. Here's the thing, I'm a pretty observant person. Processing information quickly and accurately is something I was literally trained to do in the military. So when the guy stepped out of that Tahoe, I instantly realized something was off. He didn't look like any cop I'd ever seen. He was wearing all black tactical gear, cargo pants, boots, a long-sleeve shirt, but there was nothing on him that said, police. No badge visible, no name tag, no department insignia. The only thing even remotely official looking was a patch on his shoulder that had some text I couldn't read from that distance. But more than his appearance, his behavior was wrong. Instead of approaching Kay's window like a normal traffic stop, he stood behind our vehicle. Just standing there, staring. I watched him in the side mirror, trying to figure out what he was doing. After a few seconds, I realized he wasn't just standing, he was actively analyzing the SUV. He was looking through the rear window at the bags we'd packed. He was reading Kay's bumper stickers. He was studying her license plate. Sebas and Kay eventually noticed the weird behavior too. Sebas rolled down his window and called back, "Is there a problem, officer?" Instead of responding, the man swiftly walked up to Kay's window and said in a flat, emotionless voice, "License and registration." Kay hesitated for a split second, then reluctantly handed them over. The man took them without another word and walked back to his vehicle. And then he just sat there. For a really long time. The three of us started whispering about how strange this whole encounter was. Something felt deeply wrong, but we weren't sure what to do. We were young, in the military, trained to respect authority. Walking away from a traffic stop, even a suspicious one, felt impossible. After what felt like at least 10 minutes, the man finally exited his Tahoe again. Only this time, 2 other men got out with him. My heartbeat immediately ticked up. I did some focused breathing exercises to stay calm, Another thing the military drilled into me. The original officer walked back up to Kay's window. The other two men hung back near the rear of our vehicle, just watching. The man at Kay's window asked, "Is your father in the army or something?" Kay looked confused. "What?" He gestured vaguely toward the back of her SUV. The US military bumper sticker. Kay actually laughed, partly out of nervousness, I think. "Oh, that's me. I'm in the Air Force." Then she gestured to Sebas and me. "There too. We're all stationed at Goodfellow." The moment Kay said we were military, I noticed a shift. The guy at her window didn't say anything right away, but his body language changed. He stiffened. His jaw clenched slightly. He glanced back at the two men near the rear of the SUV. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite read, some kind of silent communication. Then he turned back to Kay and said in the same flat tone, "I'm letting you off with a warning. Drive more carefully." He handed back her license and registration, turned around without another word and walked back to the Tahoe. All three men got in. Before Kay could even start the engine, the Tahoe pulled off and sped away, fast. Way faster than any legitimate traffic stop would end. The three of us sat in stunned silence for a moment. Sebas was the first to speak. "Those guys weren't real cops." Kay nodded slowly. "Yeah, something was really wrong with that." I agreed. Everything about the encounter had been off. The lack of proper identification, the strange behavior, the way they'd reacted when they found out we were military, the abrupt departure. Sebas voiced what I think all three of us were thinking. If we'd been civilians, I think something bad would have happened. We didn't know what to do. We didn't have a license plate number. The Tahoe's plates had been obscured somehow, or maybe there weren't any. We didn't have names. We had nothing concrete to report. So Kay just pulled back onto the highway and we continued toward Austin. The rest of the trip was actually great. Austin was a good time, and by the time we got back to base that night, we'd mostly forgotten about the weird traffic stop. It wasn't until about a week later that I was reminded of it. I was sitting in the rec room watching the local news with Sebas when a story came on that made me freeze. A man and woman had been found dead in a ditch along a stretch of Highway 87, just outside San Angelo. According to the reporter, the victims had been robbed and murdered. Investigators believed they'd been killed elsewhere and dumped at that location sometime the previous night. What really got me, what made my blood run cold, was the next part. The vehicle found abandoned near the scene was a black Tahoe. Police confirmed it had been reported stolen months earlier from New Mexico. Sebas and I locked eyes. We didn't even need to say it out loud. We both knew. We immediately went to find Kay, and the three of us agreed we had to tell the police what we'd seen. We went to the San Angelo Police Department that same day and told them everything. The fake traffic stop, the tactical gear, the three men, the Tahoe, the strange reaction when we mentioned being military. I felt a surge of guilt as I was talking. If we'd reported this a week earlier, would those people still be alive? The detective taking our statement assured us there was nothing we could have done differently. We had no way of knowing the men were dangerous at the time. But that didn't make me feel any better. The investigation eventually determined that the three men had been running a robbery and murder operation targeting travelers on isolated stretches of highway. They'd used the fake police lights to pull people over, rob them at gunpoint, and in some cases, kill them to avoid leaving witnesses. Our bumper sticker, the one identifying us as military, likely saved our lives that day. They didn't want the attention that would come from attacking active duty service members. 2 of the 3 men were eventually caught and convicted. The third was never found. I think about that day more often than I'd like to admit. How easily it could have been us in that ditch. How a single bumper sticker was the difference between life and death. I still drive that same highway sometimes when I visit family in Texas. And every single time I check my rearview mirror a little more carefully than I used to. Story 3, The Man Who Became Me. I've always been an extremely private person. That's part of the reason I've waited so long to share this story publicly. The thought of it somehow being traced back to me, of the perpetrator finding out I'm talking about him, genuinely terrifies me. But I was recently thinking about how it would be a shame to leave this earth without circulating this story. People need to know that this kind of thing can happen. So here it goes. I'm really stepping out of my comfort zone doing this. About 10 years ago, I was on a solo road trip from West Patterson, New Jersey, to Fort Worth, Texas. I was heading to visit my parents, whom I hadn't seen in over a year. I'd moved out of Fort Worth right after college and hadn't been back much since, so this trip felt long overdue. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, I think it was Arkansas, maybe the Oklahoma border, I can't remember exactly, my car started acting up. At first it was just a weird noise from the engine. Then a slight loss of power. I tried to ignore it for a while, hoping it would resolve itself, but eventually I had no choice but to pull over. There wasn't much around. Just trees, open fields, and a long empty highway stretching in both directions. I popped the hood and started poking around, pretending I knew what I was doing. I didn't. I was basically just killing time, staring at the engine and hoping the problem would magically reveal itself. I figured after a few minutes of pretending, I'd give up and call AAA. Except I didn't actually have AAA. Which meant I was looking at a massive towing bill I couldn't afford. A few minutes later, I heard a vehicle pulling up behind me. I turned around and saw a white pickup truck. No front license plate that I could see, just a plain white truck that looked like it had seen better days. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. If I had to guess, I'd say he was in his mid-30s, maybe a little older. But he had that worn-down look that made him seem older than he probably was. He had curly brown hair, a long, uneven beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in years, and calloused hands that suggested he worked manual labor. Honestly, he kind of looked like an older, more disheveled version of me. Same build, same height, similar coloring. Just less well-groomed. He walked over slowly, looking at my car as he approached. He didn't ask if I needed help, he just assumed it. Before I even said anything, he was leaning over the engine, examining it like he knew what he was doing. I thanked him for stopping and explained what had happened. The noise, the loss of power, the pullover. "I'm a mechanic," he said, which immediately put me at ease. Based on how quickly he started diagnosing the problem, I believed him. I was already thinking about how I could repay him for the help when he said something that surprised me. After a minute or two of fiddling with various components, he stepped back and gave the engine a look that didn't inspire confidence. "You need a compression tester," he muttered, half to himself. "Without it, this thing's not starting." Then he glanced over at his truck. "My buddy, another mechanic, might be able to bring one over. Let me give him a call." I had no idea what a compression tester even was, but he seemed genuine and knowledgeable, so I believed him. He pulled out his phone, looked at the screen for a few seconds, then put it back in his pocket. "Dead battery," he said. "Can I borrow yours to make the call?" I didn't even hesitate. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and handed it to him. He took it with one hand. And with the other hand he reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun. In that instant, I knew exactly what was happening. He didn't say much. Just told me in a calm, measured voice to sit down on the shoulder of the road and not try anything stupid. His voice didn't shake. His hands were steady. He'd clearly done this before, or at least thought about it enough that it seemed practiced. I did what he said. I sat down. The whole thing felt surreal, almost calm, like we were both just going through the motions of something routine. He went through my pockets and took my wallet. He grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat. He even made me unlock my phone and show him the passcode. Then he got in his truck and drove off. That was it. I'd just been robbed on the side of the road in broad daylight. I'm speaking about it calmly now, but at the time, I was absolutely livid. I don't think I've ever been angrier in my entire life. Someone eventually did stop and help me, a kind older couple who got my car running again and even gave me directions to my parents' house so I could navigate without my phone. I made it to Fort Worth later that night. Despite the circumstances, my visit with my parents was actually really nice. Felt good to be home. Over the next few weeks, I went through the tedious process of recovering from the robbery. I canceled all my cards, replaced my driver's license and other IDs, updated all my passwords. It was annoying and time-consuming, but I eventually got everything sorted out and moved on with my life. Fast forward 6 months. That's when things started to really fall apart. One day, I got a letter in the mail from a bank I didn't recognize. It was addressed to me, thanking me for opening a new line of credit. I assumed it was a scam or junk mail and threw it away. Then another letter came. This time from Best Buy, congratulating me on opening a new credit card. According to the statement, I'd already racked up over $1,200 in charges, all from a town in Tennessee I'd never been to. That's when it hit me. I'd completely forgotten that my Social Security card had been in my wallet when I was robbed. And now, the man who robbed me had everything he needed to become me. The next month of my life was an absolute living hell. My credit report was a disaster. Hard inquiries I'd never authorized. New credit cards opened in my name. Balances I'd never spent. It felt like every single day there was something new. If any of you have dealt with identity theft, you know how utterly hopeless it can feel. I did everything you're supposed to do. I filed a report with the FTC. I placed fraud alerts on all 3 credit bureaus. I froze my credit. I went to the police and gave them everything I had. Though without a name or license plate, they said there wasn't much they could do. I filed a formal report anyway just to create a paper trail. But somehow it wasn't enough. Things kept escalating. A few weeks later, I got a call from my health insurance provider. Someone had received emergency medical care under my name at a hospital in Georgia. This wasn't just a billing issue. There were now medical records in my file that didn't belong to me. Records that could literally kill me if I ever ended up in a hospital unable to speak for myself, and doctors made decisions based on someone else's medical history. I reported it to the police again, but they were still unable to do anything concrete without more information. That was my breaking point. I decided to take matters into my own hands. From that point on, I dedicated every ounce of my free time to tracking this guy down myself. I set up Google alerts for my name and any cities tied to the fraud. I checked my credit report obsessively. I scanned forums, dug through social media, anything I could think of. One night, on a whim, I decided to check Craigslist. I focused on cities where fraud had occurred, places where charges had shown up or mail had been sent from. After scrolling for a while, something caught my eye. It was a listing from Jackson, Tennessee. Someone was selling a bunch of used power tools and other miscellaneous items. I wasn't sure why it stood out at first, but the longer I looked, the more familiar it seemed. Then it clicked. Everything listed matched perfectly with items that had been charged to that fraudulent Best Buy card 6 months earlier. I sat there for a long time, heart pounding, unsure what to do. Eventually, I responded to the listing. I said I was interested in a couple of items and asked if they were still available. I debated trying to attach some kind of tracker link or do something clever, but I didn't want to spook him. If he suspected anything, he'd vanish. So I kept it simple and casual. To my surprise, the guy seemed totally oblivious. After exchanging emails over the next few days, he gave me a time and public location to meet. He told me to bring cash. The meeting was supposed to happen the next day. I seriously debated driving to Tennessee myself. Part of me wanted to confront him face to face, to see the look on his face when he realized he'd been caught. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. There's no telling what I would have done if I'd actually seen him again in person. Instead, I called the police department in Jackson, Tennessee. I explained my situation and gave them every detail I had. The Craigslist listing, the matching items, the timeline, everything. By some miracle, they took me seriously. They said the details lined up well enough that they'd at least try to make contact with him. The next day, through some back and forth communication, I got the guy to tell me he'd be driving a red pickup truck to the meeting. I immediately relayed that to the police. Then I waited. Hours passed. I was checking my phone every 5 minutes, barely able to function. Finally, they called me back. What they told me made me want to drop to my knees. The officer said that as soon as the guy spotted patrol cars near the meetup location, he immediately sped out of the parking lot. Didn't even try to play it cool. That alone raised enough red flags for them to follow him. Not long after, the guy lost control of his truck and crashed into a ditch. It wasn't a major accident, but it was enough to get officers legally involved beyond just casual questioning. According to the police, the guy was a total wreck when they approached him. Visibly shaken, panicking, talking in circles. As soon as they mentioned the Best Buy items, he completely folded. He admitted the stuff wasn't his. Said a friend had given it to him and he'd decided to resell it independently. It couldn't have been more perfect. He ratted out his friend to save himself. And with his cooperation, the police were able to gather enough evidence to arrest the actual person who'd robbed me, the man with the curly hair and the beard who'd pulled a gun on me on that empty highway. I've never felt more relief in my entire life. I'm trying to keep things vague from here on out because I genuinely don't want this traced back to me. But I will say this. The man who robbed me wasn't acting alone. There were 3 of them total, running a coordinated operation. They'd been targeting isolated travelers on interstate highways throughout the South, using the broken-down car routine to get people to stop, then robbing them at gunpoint. I wasn't their only victim. Not even close. Eventually, all 3 of them were caught, charged, and convicted. I'm not going to say anything more specific than that, but justice was served. And I can finally sleep at night knowing the man who became me, who stole my identity, my credit, my medical records, my entire life for 6 months, is never going to do it to anyone else again. 3 road trips. 3 nightmare scenarios that transformed ordinary journeys into experiences these people will never forget. I want to thank everyone who shared their stories with me. It takes real courage to revisit these traumatic experiences and put them out there for the world to hear. To everyone listening, whether you're planning a road trip soon or just driving to work tomorrow, please stay vigilant. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Lock your doors. Don't stop for strangers in isolated areas. And if you're ever pulled over by an unmarked vehicle, you have the right to call 911 and verify that it's a legitimate traffic stop before you pull over. These stories are real. They happen to real people. And they could happen to anyone. If you found value in tonight's episode, please like and subscribe. Share these stories with someone who needs to hear them. Stay safe out there. Pay attention. And remember, the scariest stories are always the ones that actually happened. Until next time.